Welcome. So on behalf of FaithInvest and the Laudato Si Movement, a very warm welcome to this webinar. My name is Johannes van der Ven. I'm managing the Good Energies Foundation and presiding the World Resources Institute Brazil. And as a moral theologian and development economist by formation, it's a privilege to welcome you to this webinar, which we are organizing in collaboration with the Dicastery for promoting integral human development of the Vatican. And today we are going to discuss how faith, science, and philanthropy could or should unite for decisive and more ambitious climate action. And we think this is a very timely conversation as we are rapidly approaching the United Nations Climate Change Conference later this week, starting in Dubai. And as you know, this is already the 28th climate COP. But only for the first time ever in history, there will be a faith pavilion. And this faith pavilion will be hosted by the Muslim Council of Elders, and Pope Francis is expected to deliver the inaugural speech. So for sure, leaders from many faith traditions will leverage their spiritual capital and wisdom for more ambitious climate action. And this might be a crucial contribution as faith has so much influence on attitudes and lifestyles. In fact, we can even say that faith-based organizations have been in the business of profound behavior change for thousands of years. To reflect on how faith can really make a difference, we have invited 5 outstanding leaders who will each make brief introductory reflections, all from different angles and perspectives, coming from different faith traditions, from the north and the south, from the east and the west, followed by a session with questions and answers. So if you are following us in a Zoom link, please feel free to type questions you might have so we can raise them during the Q&A session. So first, I would like to call Professor Dr. Johan Rockström, originally from Sweden. Johan is the director of the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research and is also the co-chair of the Earth Commission of the Global Commons Alliance, and much more. Johan, for the first time ever in history, a climate COP will have a faith pavilion, right? Also co-hosted by the United Nations Environment Programme. And at the Global Faith Leaders Summit in Abu Dhabi a few weeks ago, an interfaith statement for the COP was presented. And in this interfaith statement, and now I'm quoting, it is welcoming the contributions of science, it is calling for a dialogue with scientists, is encouraging a paradigm shift in our relationship with Earth. And the statement even talks about a sacred duty we all have. This sounds all very aligned with your groundbreaking work on planetary boundaries and on tipping points. So my question to you, Johan, is how do you see the role of faith in helping mobilize and advance ambitious climate agendas, right? Where do you think can faith contribute the most without being instrumentalized by scientism or bad science? Johan, over to you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks a lot, Johannes, for this invite. And let me just start at the end. I mean, I think there's a very tight troika between science, faith, and Mother Earth. And to explain that, let me start in the science end. I mean, when we meet in Dubai, when we are having this session here today, science is clear. We are now having, unfortunately, to conclude that we are at risk of destabilizing the entire planet. We are undermining life support for all species on Earth, including us humans. We're following a pathway that will take us to 3 degrees Celsius of global mean surface temperature rise within this century. Dear friends, let me be very clear that the climate science community is entirely in agreement here. This is a path to disaster. There's no evidence that we can, with dignity and with responsibility, provide life support for 8, soon to be 9 billion co-citizens on planet Earth, on a planet that is 3 degrees Celsius warmer than the average temperature that took us into the industrial, globalized world that we live in today. The last time we had 3 degrees Celsius was 4 million years ago. That's even outside of the Quaternary. It's outside even what you geologically can define as our home, planet Earth, under the biogeophysical conditions as we know them today. 1.2 degrees Celsius is already beyond the social boundary. Social sciences have shown that already beyond 1 degree Celsius, we actually hit unacceptable levels of significant harm to millions of people and communities around the world. So we are already in a point of crisis. 6 of 9 planetary boundaries are outside of their safe space. What does this mean? It means that in the midst of the climate crisis, planet Earth is losing health. We're losing resilience, the capacity of nature to buffer the stresses caused by our climate forcing and energy imbalance. So this is an existential threat. It's a deep moral imperative. What right do we have, who are on charge in this generation, to hand over to our children a less livable planet than the home when we ourselves were born? So in my mind, Johannes, and all of us, science connects with faith. Destabilizing planet Earth means that we are threatening creation. We're not only breaching physical boundaries, we are actually trespassing moral boundaries. And these moral boundaries are set up by the faith systems in the world. These are the human belief systems that functions as beacons of light and social guardians in our lives and in our relationships with planet Earth, with nature, and with fellow Earthlings. So this is something that has to do with science and faith. But just to close, Johannes, it has also something to do with power, because the big religions in the world, have following of over 6 billion people. This is the vast majority of world population. And given that the situation is so urgent, given that we have to accelerate and scale the transitions towards a manageable, safe, and sustainable future, all those who follow belief systems believe in their faith and they follow their disciples on earth. This places such a large responsibility on the shoulders of faith leaders. This means that we know that the crisis we're in is so deep, but that all people, irrespective of faith, need to now accelerate and follow a pathway in the same direction. This is what places a special responsibility on science and on faith to be able to provide the stories, the narratives, and the encouragement of accelerating the path in the right direction. We must therefore all fellows, humans on earth, move together. I do not see a way of succeeding on this transition without a helping hand from faith and belief systems. So I think this is really, really welcome to have a faith pavilion at the COP. And I hope really that this pavilion will be an attractor and heard across all the zones in Dubai.
Thank you so much, Johan. It's very loud and clear. I like the fact that you are not only talking about trespassing the planetary boundaries, but also trespassing the moral boundaries, as you very well said. And indeed, the importance of faith, as you said, this reminds me of the Pew Research Center, which argues that a massive 84% of people globally identify with a religion, right? 84% of people globally identify with a religion. So it makes total sense to really tap into the wisdom of this faith tradition to really unite, as the science is very clear. Thank you very much, Johan, for your intervention. And then next, I would like to call from the Vatican, we have Sister Alessandra Smerilli, who is the Secretary of the Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development. And Sister Alessandra, for the first time ever, a Pope will attend a thematic summit of the United Nations, right? Pope Francis will address the delegates in Dubai and will also speak at the inaugural session of the Faith Pavilion. Very exciting. And a few weeks ago, he promulgated an apostolic exhortation, Laudato Deum, right, which is basically an update of his highly influential encyclical Laudato Si back in 2015, which was so influential for endorsing the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Climate Agreement. And this new document, Laudato Deum, is very much a prophetic call to action with a very strong moral imperative. So my question to you, Sister Alessandra, if I may, more generally, what is the significance, you think, of the presence of our Holy Father in Dubai? And perhaps also a little bit more specifically, what are the key messages of Laudato Deum? Thank you. Over to you, sister.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you who are following us from different time zones. And the Pope's presence at COP is important from several perspectives. Not only for the first time, as you said, that a Pope attends in person a COP, but also the first time that a pontiff ever attends an UN thematic summit outside Rome. It signals how the climate crisis continues to be at the very top of the Pope's list of priorities. And then by going to this COP in a Muslim country, he also signaling the importance of all faiths in tackling the crisis. The Pope has a very clear agenda that he'll bring to COP. It was articulated in his recent letter on the climate crisis that you were mentioning, Laudate Deum, praise God. And Pope Francis is extremely worried that we are not responding adequately to the climate emergency. He unequivocally aligns the Catholic Church with the scientific consensus we have just heard from Johan. As he explains in the introductions, in number 2, 8 years have passed since I published the encyclical letter Laudato Si. With the passage of time, I realized that our response have not been adequate, while the world in which we live is collapsing and may be nearing the breaking point. These are his words. And after reviewing the latest alarm bells from climate science, the Pope warns, number 16, we are now unable to halt the enormous damage we have caused. We barely have time to prevent even more tragic damage. And moreover, he has a strong appeal to COP28. This conference can represent a change of direction, showing that everything done since 1992 was in fact serious and worth of effort, or else it will be a great disappointment. The stakes couldn't be higher. The Pope urges the international community to keep betting on multilateralism as an essential way of solving global problems, even if there is a strong need to reconfigure multilateralism. Despite concerns around failures of negotiations, we need to keep investing in COPs. We have no other choice. And the Pope names the critical issues that needs to be focused on at COP28, namely the need for this decisive acceleration of energy transition. He calls for the abandonment of fossil fuels and an energy transition to be binding, drastic, intense, and count on the commitment of all. The Pope is not afraid to call out the apparent incongruencies around this COP. Gas and oil companies, he says, are planning new projects there with the aim of further increasing their production. It will be suicidal, for it would mean exposing all humanity, especially the poorest, to the worst impacts of climate change. Delays, he says, are increasingly deadly. Then, in Laudato Deum, the Pope names the problem of false information the world now faces. He is sketching in the way that corporate interests are now combining with the widespread of use of marketing and false information. This is a threat also to tackling climate change. He recognizes that this is even a problem with his own flock, the global Catholic Church. Third, the Pope is strongly encouraging of civil society to shift the paradigm towards a sustainable future. A broad, multi-faith and secular movement is essential to shift the status quo. He recognizes that civil societies can and is capable of creating effective dynamics that United Nations cannot. These groups, which are often named as radicalized, are actually filling a space left empty by the society as a whole. And so concluding, whilst the Pope message at COP will point to the need for us all to align behind the science and to name the energy transitions as central to this, his visit is about much more. The Pope is a spiritual leader with deep love for all humanity and our earth, especially those who are not seen or heard at COP. He wants to call each of us to an ecological conversion, a change of heart, however we choose to name that. There are no lasting changes without cultural changes, without a maturing of lifestyles and convictions within societies, and there are no cultural changes without personal changes. He is calling us to a new consciousness of the gift we have been entrusted with on this small blue planet and their interconnectedness to all living things. This deep motivation, this encouragement not to give up, even when things look very dark at times, is as important as what he says. It's as important as what he says. As he says, at the end of the Laudate Deum, the world sings of an infinite love. How can we fail to care for it? Finally, the Pope, he has done, as he has done from his earliest writings, wants to remind us that the cry of the poor and the cry of the earth are the same cry. There are no separate crises, but one great socio-environmental crisis. And so care for the earth and care for the brother and sister are the same care, the same commitment. Thank you.
Thank you, Sis Alessandra. Very well said. A very clear message indeed from our Holy Father. And if you read indeed Laudate Deum, there is indeed not much room for misinterpretation. He's very spot on. And he really is aligning the church with the scientific consensus, as already highlighted by Johan. And as you indeed said, the COP should be a change of directions and above all, a change of hearts, right? As we have no other choice, as he is saying. Thank you so much for bringing this message here, sister. So let's now move on to the other side of the world, live from the United States. I would like to call Andrew Steer, the CEO of the Bezos Earth Fund, the world's largest climate philanthropy. In prior incarnations, Andrew served as the CEO of the World Resources Institute and also served as the World Bank's special envoy for climate change and much more. And Andrew, I also would like to raise a general and a more specific question to you, if I may. First, more generally, right? Faith, as we heard, has tremendous capillarity across the entire world, right? In almost every village, anywhere in the world, there is a church or a mosque or a temple, or you name it, another faith-based organization. Would it therefore not be absolutely crucial for philanthropy to embrace faith-based actors more forcefully, right? As you know, faith-based actors and movements have been the pioneers in, for example, boycotting apartheid way back, and more recently in divesting away from fossil fuels. And this is wouldn't it be a privilege for philanthropy to work more explicitly with faith-based organizations? That's from the more general viewpoint, and then more specifically, your role at the Bezos Earth Fund, Andrew, you explicitly focus on system change, right? And you even have a system change lab. So my question is, what could be the role of faith in such a lab? Over to you, Andrew.
Well, thank you, Johannes, and thanks to all of you for this extremely important dialogue. And just to build upon what Johan and Sister Alessandra said, look, the answer is how wonderful it is that the Pope is going to join us in Dubai and will have a big impact. How wonderful it is that we have the iconic Laudato Si and now Laudatus Deum. If you ask what are the most important pieces written on climate change and ecology, Laudato Si would be up there, probably more influential than the Stern report. I don't know. But what a great gift from God that we have this. I used to be a professor of economics. Economists like to think that human beings are motivated by incentives that are financial. And so if you tax pollution, that's the best way of dealing with pollution and so on. Yes, that matters. But the evidence is overwhelming that it's actually what you believe that will drive how you behave, how you vote, how you think about recycling, how you think about your future generations. And so faith, which, as you said, Johannes, is the driving force of most of humanity, must play a decisive role. And your point about system change is a very good one. Up until now, most reductions, to the extent they've happened in greenhouse gases, have come about without the need for massive behavioral and system change. So if you look at the United Kingdom, for example, actually emissions have fallen, incomes have risen, and most citizens don't know anything about the reduction, because now instead of getting coal-based electricity, they get gas-based electricity. That's not system change. It's not behavioral change. But over the next 10 years, we're going to have to see behavioral change. We're going to have to change the way we live, we travel, we work, and so on. That requires an issue of the heart. And what I love about the kind of thing that some of you are working on is that whilst in the climate change movement, we've been in search of a really crisp narrative for years. People like Johan have been absolutely on the front line of defining a narrative, linking climate change to science, to the economy and society and so on. But actually, the faith-based narrative is already there. And it's true in basically all faiths. I mean, in the Christian and Judaic tradition, the Old Testament could not be more clear. Think of four things. First, right at the very beginning, God saw that it was good. God saw that it was morally good. Every time during the creation story, he saw that it was good. The goodness of God's creation is a massive driver of behavior, as it should become. And second, it's crystal clear that actually tending to God's creation is the very first commandment. The first commandment is actually not in Exodus chapter 20, where we have the 10 commandments. It's actually right at the beginning of Genesis, where it says, tend the earth, be good stewards. That is the very first commandment. But also, nature, if you like, creation, is the first evangelist. Go to the Psalms, the heavens declare the glory of God. The nature itself speaks on behalf of God. And yet, how could we see the glory of God if the world is the air is so polluted, you can't see the stars? He's saying, look up there and see what you can. So it's amazing. And then you think about sort of a fourth, if you like, pillar is the 600 references to the poor and our obligations to the poor. And as Johan was saying, and the sister Alessandra was saying, actually what we are doing to the poor of the world through climate change is so deeply immoral that every single one of those 600 references should be screaming out, with red flashing lights. We know full well that if you are a farmer in the Sahel and you are already finding it very hard to eke out a living, and now, my goodness me, it becomes impossible. Because it turns out now, and I'm sure you've sort of seen it, just some terrible negative tipping points. I went not long ago to the Bekaa Valley in Jordan and in Lebanon. And there you see the fact that even though the temperature is only 2 degrees higher, that enables the bugs to live through the winter. So they multiply. So you suddenly see this tipping point even there for farmers and so on. And that is replicated 1,000 examples like that. And people like Johan document that all the time. So in other words, we have an incredibly sort of crisp narrative, which is actually more persuasive than the environmental movement has come up with regard to climate change. So what does that all imply? It implies that we need to embrace the faith community, and we need to do all we can to give the faith community a seat at the table and a respect that is deserved. And I know, Johannes, that you and the Laudato Si movement are thinking hard about the next 2 years in the lead up to Brazil, and certainly from the standpoint of the Bezos Earth Fund, we would love to work with you. And I'd love to go on further. Let me just say one thing, that not everywhere is it true that people of faith are in the right place on this. Sister Alessandra said that even in the Catholic Church, there are parts that actually aren't in the right place. But far, far worse than that is in this country, in the United States. You've got an evangelical community here that actually has, in many ways, some of them, a significant number of them, have rejected science. And so what we have to do in working with the faith community is support those that really understand what the scriptures say and want to live their lives in the light of it. But also we need to do what we can to support a change in mindset. We're working with some organizations here that are evangelical, but scientists, with the goal of understanding that there is a new generation of people that grew up in highly conservative homes that disrespected science, and little by little, the goal is to create, a scientifically literate as well as a spiritually literate generation that will actually then be part of the solution rather than part of the problem. Back to you, Johannes.
Thank you so much, Andrew. That is also very loud and clear, as you well said, that system change requires behavior change, and behavior change requires a change of heart. And that's exactly where the faith narrative can be indeed very influential, can be a very connective tissue. And as you also said, we need to embrace with more rigor and vigor the faith community and give them a seat at the table. Thank you so much, Andrew, for this intervention. So next, I would like to call Lorna Gold. Originally from Scotland, Lorna is serving as the CEO of FaithInvest, and also is the board president of the Laudato Si Movement. FaithInvest is a non-profit that supports faith to align their investments to their mission and values. And the Laudato Si Movement is a vast network of over 1,000 Catholic organizations united for climate justice. So Lorna, I also would like to raise a more general and a more specific question to you, for you to reflect on, if I may. First, about faith and science, right? If you look back, faith and science, they often appear as contradictions, right? You're either a person of science or a person of faith, and that should not be the case, right? As you hear Pope Francis and many other spiritual leaders, they're now leading the fight on climate change, and it's all very much aligned with the scientific consensus, as Johan said at the beginning. So how do you see faith and climate science coming together? Where do they converge, right? Do you think there is more that faith could be doing, and how could that happen? So that's more a general question, and then more specifically, in your respective roles at FaithInvest and the Laudato Si Movement, where do you see the biggest opportunities to bring this home? Over to you, Lorna.
Thanks, Johannes, and thanks to everyone for this great opportunity to come together on this really critical topic. I have a few slides that my colleague's going to share, just to help you to follow what I'm going to say. So, I mean, I see that there's a huge opportunity on the horizon when it comes to working with the faith on the climate crisis, as well as responding to the increasingly urgent challenges of adaptation. As we've already heard mentioned, faiths are key stakeholders in our world, highly motivated, organised, with scalable solutions, already activated from the grassroots all the way up to the grass top, faiths have potential to become the bedrock of the biggest environmental movement in the world. These statistics speak for themselves. It's a game-changing power, game-changing potential, and underlies that power that Johan spoke of earlier. For those of us who work in this space, embedded within the faith, we see that there's so much work that needs to be done to harness this full potential. We are building on the phenomenal work that's been done over many decades to build environmental action and to put it at the heart of the beliefs, teachings, and values of the faith. We've all seen these pictures of faith leaders. We've read the declaration. We've already heard mention of this idea of a sacred duty. So this idea of a climate environmental faith movement is not starting from scratch, not by any stretch of the imagination. The groundwork for scalable, science-aligned environmental action has already been done. The ecosystem is rich, it's diverse, and it's vast. What characterizes this impactful work is that it's happening from the inside out. It starts by digging deep into the faith, teachings, and values, those narratives, and enables the faith to be more truly themselves. It isn't an imposition on the faith from the outside, but integral to each faith story. Of course, within this, science matters, and the links to science, the best solutions, are increasingly important as intentions are translated into action. But as with climate communications in general, and Andrew already touched on this, if you start with the science alone, it's highly unlikely that you'll ever result in action and impact. The message doesn't stick. However, if you start with the richness of faith, the wisdom of faith, the beauty and diversity of the faith traditions, which all commit in one way or another to compassion and to working together to care for our sacred earth, you can spark action. It's then logical to bring in science, to double down on the realities we're facing, and to start to collaborate together. I'm here representing two organisations which I feel exemplify this effective inside-out approach. The first is the Laudato Si Movement, which we've already heard mentioned, of which I'm the board chair, which operates largely within the Catholic world. Pope Francis in 2015 wrote his groundbreaking letter, Laudato Si, on the environment, which was directed to all people on the planet. It could have stayed on a shelf and gathered dust. Instead, through the actions of a few lay Catholics, especially a young Argentinian man, Thomas Insua, who's also in our meeting today, a true global movement was sparked. This movement now has over 1,000 institutional members. It has trained up to 30,000 grassroots animators. It has 60 national chapters. It collaborates at the grass tops with the Vatican on critical projects such as the Laudato Si Action Platform and the film The Letter. And it works tirelessly to influence, bringing Catholic voices together to care for our common home. The other example, the other organisation, which I now lead as CEO, was founded by Martin Palmer, formerly of ARC, in 2019. FaithInvest is a not-for-profit organisation which is multi-faith. We work on systemic change within the worlds of faith and finance. Faith asset owners are major institutional investors, yet remarkably few, despite their faith, apply those faith values consistently in how they choose to invest. In many cases, the faith commitment has become somewhat nominal. There are many reasons for this, but our experience as FaithInvest shows that with some relatively simple but significant shifts in governance, starting by centering investment policies on faith, big changes of capital allocation can take place. If faith values are put front and centre, the rest flows. We've already seen the impact when this happens. And the leadership of faith organisations in the fossil fuel divestment movement. In 2019, in Ireland, where I'm based, we became the first country in the world to legislate to divest from fossil fuels. This campaign started with the faith-based organisations, with faith NGOs like Chokra, working with the Catholic bishops of Ireland in order to re-evaluate their investment policies in line with Laudato Si. The result was divestment. And once the churches shifted, the universities then moved, and the government eventually had to move, and it resulted in a snowball effect. Suddenly, markets shifted to match the increasing demand for fossil-free products. Bringing change like this about requires resources. Most of this work, I'll be honest, is done on a shoestring. The faiths are mainly movement-based. Faiths know that profound change, paradigm shift, changing the narrative is not going to happen during office hours. They make it a life's mission, a vocation. But just imagine the snowball that could result if even a fraction of the philanthropy and the knowledge of science in this room got behind the deep systems change of faith being spearheaded by the likes of Laudato Si Movement, FaithInvest, and Huda, who we're just about to hear from. We could see all the faith lands used for regeneration at scale, places of worship right across the world spearheading energy, community efficient energy efficiency and clean energy. Faith communities embracing sustainable lifestyles based on their faith teachings. Faith leveraging their investments for climate solutions at scale. Faiths need to be engaged effectively. I dare to say we cannot solve the climate crisis without such engagement. This can only be done from the inside out, from the grassroots to the grass tops. That means supporting those groups already working within the faiths to accelerate commitment and action, supporting us to go to scale. I believe the greatest opportunity is still before us. It's essential that we continue to build hope, and that's what faiths do. That hope is here today in this room, in the powerful alignment of faith, backed by science, and the capital of those who dream big. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorna. Thank you for your intervention, Lorna. You made me actually realize that it's actually really mind-blowing that the way faith-based actors are managing their own assets is not really in line with their own underlying values, right? Often you see buildings running on dirty fossil fuels. You have pension plans invested in stocks that are actually in contradiction with the underlying faith values, and that should actually be low-hanging fruit for faith traditions to do this. So I think that's tremendous opportunity we have both for the movement and for FaithInvest to work on, to bring more consistency in the way we preach, the way we talk, right, as faithful people, and the way we manage our own physical and financial assets. Thank you so much. So let's now move to the east, right? Last but not least, I would like to invite Huda Jaffer. Hello, good evening, Huda. Huda is the the director of SELCO Foundation, a leading social enterprise working on access to clean energy. And Huda is also the mastermind behind the global SDG 7 hubs, SDG 7 for clean and sustainable energy. And that's very important for bringing clean energy solutions for healthcare and education and livelihoods throughout Africa and Asia, where you're mostly working. So Huda, if I look at the mission, right, if I understand well of SELCO and also the global SDG 7 hubs, it is very much aligned with the interfaith statement that just got released for the upcoming climate COP, right? And I'm reading here this interfaith statement for the COP is really calling for fast-tracking energy transitions, ensuring fairness and equity, and what's morally right. So my question to you, in your work on the ground, how do you see the role of faith-based organizations? Do you think they are really fast-tracking, or could they do more, right? And perhaps more specifically, you can give us a few examples in your broad experience in working with faith-based organizations in catalyzing climate action. Over to you, Huda.
Thank you so much, Johannes. Thank you for having me. Very honored and very excited to be a part of this panel, and of course for the upcoming COP events that we're going to witness over the next couple of weeks. First off, I really want to sort of congratulate, I think, the organizers. It's, for me, I think every time that faith-based conversation is linked to climate and change on the ground, it just sort of sparks so much of drive and inspiration and urgency, a sense of urgency. And I think we need so many more of these to happen. So I think this is just wonderful. And even the way that the panel is structured, I think, Johan really bringing that urgency with the facts on the ground, and Sister Alessandra completely bringing that drive and that inspiration that is needed, and Andrew really sort of providing that framework of thinking and way forward, and really wonderful to hear from Lorna on just how laying out the opportunity, and I couldn't connect more with a lot of what has been said. What I want to bring today, and I think in response to your question, Johannes, is really some examples of how faith-based organizations on the ground are working towards that systemic change, and how there is a fair level of transformation that has been possible because of faith-based organizations and faith-driven initiatives that have been initiated on the ground. And so essentially what we do at SELCO and Global SDG 7 Hubs is really kind of make the energy transition piece, the clean energy efficiency, part and parcel of the development agenda. Not look at it as a supply side siloed issue, but how should it become a default thought process when someone thinks about providing better healthcare, better education, better livelihoods on the ground. And I think that's where a lot of our work has been influenced and triggered and snowballed with faith-based organizations. So it's really important, I think, for these examples to be not only recognized, but also to be multiplied, globally as well, right? And so, I mean, just to, cover some examples on how this is happening on the ground. One of the largest examples that I can think of is, where we've worked with Don Bosco, the Green Alliance, and the Don Bosco Skilling Institutes, both in India and in Africa, to institutionalized solar-based training programs, energy efficiency-based training programs in literally thousands of skills institutes in rural areas, which is such an important sort of core backbone to providing climate smart solutions at the doorstep, right? And so especially for communities that actually it's not so much about, the decision-making factor for vulnerable communities. It's not so much about faith or behavior. It is about practicality. It is about viability. It is about, is it feasible for them to actually adopt these solutions? And it is. I mean, today it is. So how do we really sort of use faith-based organizations to catalyze and make this exponential shift? Another very key example that comes to mind, which I think Lorna also pointed out in one of her slides, that it was 26% of health centers are actually run by Catholic institutions. And wherever we have worked across India and in Africa, those are the first champions that you find who actually are taking it up and are proving what kind of impact can happen if you power your health centers with clean energy, if you use energy efficiency appliances, the type of cost reduction that happens, especially for communities that are underserved and underprivileged. I think those are changes which we are actually seeing the snowball effect. These were programs that were championed by the Catholic Health Association of India, Sister Equinas, Dr. Reggie, all stalwarts in public health. And they were the ones that actually took up clean energy for powering public health institutions. And now, because of that, what has happened is India has taken up one of the largest programs on powering health with solar energy in the world. So 25,000 health centers in India, close to 12% of the population, really kind of moving to 100% solar and renewable based, public health value chain, right? And the same program now is being taken up by WHO in Africa for 10,000 more centers. It's actually been showcased at COP as well. So you actually see that snowball that's happened, which has been triggered very much by faith-based organizations, also replicated by faith-based organizations. Another example is the Temple Trust that we work with. So, essentially in India, there's a large temple trust that does financing, and they have literally financed solar and clean energy and efficiency-driven livelihoods for literally millions of entrepreneurs in southern India. And that's, again, driven by the Temple Trust, essentially. And that's purely responsible for the scale of why it happened at the pace at which it happened, because it had a faith-based anchor, essentially really driving it, right? Similarly, Lorna, on your slide, you mentioned 46% of schools run by, faith-based institutions. And we couldn't agree more that the entire Light for Education program, the solar digital education program that has scaled to a large extent in certain parts of East and Northeast India, is also because of certain Muslim-driven educational institutes, right? I was also chatting with Johannes, telling him about how a lot of the Buddhist monasteries and a lot of the Buddhist health centers have also been, like, institutions have actually taken it up, right? So, I mean, I guess I just want to sort of summarize by saying that a lot of these examples, while you have faith-based organizations that have driven this change, the impact has really been across society and across humanity, really impacting all types of faiths, and really having that systems change on the ground that we're really looking for. And as I was saying, it's been adopted because it is the only most viable and feasible option today in terms of convenience, in terms of the options available to most communities, right? And they are the ones sort of showing the path for the future, I think. So beyond that, I also feel like that has been able to impact other stakeholders only after the championship of faith-based organizations, which then impacts governments and enterprises and markets in general. So it's really quite powerful to listen to a lot of what was said, and to just imagine that if we were able to spur a lot of this multifold within a given timeline, the kind of impact that it can have both on people and planet. I just want to echo very quickly what Andrew was bringing on systems thinking and systems change. I mean, couldn't agree more. I think a lot of times as philanthropy, civil society bodies and movements, and even faith-based movements, we tend to sort of get into this project mode of, meeting numbers and, a more sort of a charity-based mode. But I think the importance right now to accept that these are complex changes that we want to see, to zoom out and really look at what are the enabling conditions and how do we really impact and change those enabling conditions for good in the future. I think that is something that is so important. So really happy to be part of this, and I really look forward to more solutioning and working together and a lot more action on the ground. Thank you so much, Johannes.
No, thank you, Huda, and thank you all for those great introductory remarks. I think all 5 interventions were very informative and very, very inspirational. So now we would like to open the floor for questions. So if you are connected on Zoom, then please put your questions in the chat box. So first, if I may, I see a question perhaps for you, Andrew, if you're still here. It's a question on how to avoid to go back to business as usual after the COP. The COP will be just a week, and then after a week will be business as usual again. And you mentioned already asking me the COP coming to Brazil, right? To Belém, the mouth of the mighty, the Amazon. And as you were saying, I think we have a unique chance to bring faith-based actors together there after 10 years after Paris, and to see if we can really walk the talk. And as you might have seen, the faith-based institutions, they have a very important role to play. They are huge managers of physical assets. But let me bring in 2 other interesting statistics. One is on how they manage intellectual assets, right? Around 50% of all schools worldwide are run by faith-based institutions, and even 1/3 of all universities worldwide, right? They are managed by faith-based actors. And I'm very happy to see the rector of my own alma mater, Puki Rio, to be present here on this call. And I would also say strategic communications, right? Today we talk about influencers on social media, but there is no more organized outreach on a regular basis to more people anywhere than faith-based organizations, right? It's faith as influencers. So running more media outlets than faith is almost impossible. How would you see this, Andrew, that we do not fall back to business as usual after the Dubai COP is over?
Well, it is a very real risk. I mean, one of the problems with these annual COPs is that, you know, this time there's going to be, I understand, 45,000 people, you know, a total scrum in Dubai, and people staying up late at night arguing. And by the end of the 2 weeks, exhaustion, you know, wow, go home, take a rest, and then maybe pick it up again, you know, next April or May sort of thing. That is a very real risk. Now, we made a lot of progress, and thanks indeed. I mean, I look at people on the screen like Alex from the Sunrise Board. They don't let that happen. We now have the ability to actually monitor ourselves. We actually can monitor forests falling week after week after week down to almost tree level. So too, we actually now can measure methane from satellites. So we actually can know. So on that side of things, we're actually getting quite good at measuring, and companies now who obviously, you know, slowly getting in the right place, they are now able to be held accountable. But for those of us in the faith movement, I think it is a good question for us to ask ourselves, actually. You know, what we've heard in the last almost an hour is, I mean, totally inspiring. I think listening to Huda and listening to Lorna and what's actually, you know, going on, just incredible. That story about Ireland, brilliant. And what the SELCO Foundation is doing, wonderful. I mean, look at their website. It is terrific. So great things are going on. But at the same time, it is a bit surprising that we aren't more present, actually. I mean, go to sort of the corridors of power, including COP28, you will see 1,000 CEOs of companies having a big impact, and some of them having a good impact, not all, but some of them having a very good impact. Where are the 1,000 clerics? Where are the 1,000, you know, go even, I'm not saying everyone should go to Davos, but go to Davos, you see the same thing. You see incredible sort of influence of CEOs. Where are we, the faith movement, in all of that? How do we sort of raise the game? So whilst we are right to, and I think Lorna made a good point, that actually, you didn't say this, but implicitly, the private sector has a lot of resources to do whatever they want. They can go to Davos whilst you're acting on a shoestring. So we need to think about that as well. So I would say because the faith community is so strong, the way we've heard it over the last almost an hour, actually more is expected of us. We should be more present. We should be more influential. And there's always sort of two things, aren't there? On the one hand, there's the nudge, which is changing the behavior of the faithful and being a moral voice to the unfaithful and the faithful alike. But then there's also the sort of casting over the money changers tables in the temple, isn't there? You know, there's that righteous indignation. Getting those two right, and on the screen, we actually have representatives from both, and we need both of those. So, we need to have joy and accomplishment, but at the same time, figure out, okay, how could we pull our own socks up?
Wonderful, Andrew. I think it's a wonderful call to action, right? To raise the game, and more is expected. And it's actually a very nice bridge to another question I got. So if I may, perhaps, Lorna, this is a nice question for you to tackle. We've seen a lot of greenwashing, right, by companies in general, greenwashing. And how should we avoid faith washing by faith-based organization, right? I mean, we're going to have the faith pavilion. You're expecting a prophetic message to be voiced there. Is it a valid concern that faith washing might occur in Dubai? May I ask you?
It's a good question. I mean, I think some people are kind of concerned about the Pope stepping into this, which is quite, like, we've all seen the news today. There are big questions around the motivations, and I think there's no secret around that. And I think some people are making decisions to even boycott this COP because they just feel it's completely discredited even before it's begun. But I think that, I mean, Sister Alessandra spoke so well about the motivation of the Pope and Laudato Si, and the importance at this moment, recognizing how, like, almost farcical some of what's going on feels right now, but not giving up on the multilateral system at this point. And as you say, I think your point's really good, Andrew, about raising our game, and I guess that does also come down to capacity and resources, and, you know, the fact that a lot of the work happens at the grassroots and people just don't have the money for, or they don't want to get on aeroplanes anymore and head into the scrum. I love the image of the scrum in Dubai. So I think there is a risk of this being faith washed, this COP, and we need to look out for that. I think it'll be more on the part of how it's spun by the media, and we obviously have quite limited control over how certain media outlets decide to spin, or how the COP presidency even would perhaps choose to hide behind some of the faith actions and the razzmatazz that goes around a Pope's visit. But what I can say is that the Pope, as far as I'm aware, is very conscious of this himself. He absolutely knows where he's going. And he is conscious of the possibility that some may choose to try and manipulate his presence there. So I think we have a leader in Pope Francis who's very attuned to using political opportunities and making sure that they're used to the max. And then for the faith movement, it's really about maximizing the chances at the Faith Pavilion. To me, the great opportunity is the fact that it's in the blue zone. There's an opportunity here to bring in, and there's 70 amazing events, from the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty to faith-based approaches to land regeneration. The whole spectrum of faith activities will be there. So we can bring people into that space, and that's something really positive, and get the media message out from the faiths as well. So yeah, it is a risk, but it's bigger than even the faith. I think the greenwashing, the faith washing, the God knows sports washing, every kind of laundry.
Thank you, Lorna. And time is flying, and unfortunately, we do not have much more time. And I want to be respectful of the time set, right, for this webinar. But I really learned a lot, and I would like to summarize, or at least bring in two big highlights, key takeaways from this webinar, this conversation. For me, it's very clear, listening to all of you, that fostering a meaningful space for faith, science, and philanthropy to interact and to cross-fertilize is something that deserves to be nurtured much more and much deeper. Because I think only a process of deep listening and healing and co-creation can bring about lasting change we really are looking for. That's my first big takeaway. And my second one is that faith might be the connective tissue, right, that brings all this climate action together. And hopefully this will be voiced at the Faith Pavilion. Because let us be clear, I think the science is very clear. We heard it from Johan. I think the capital that is collectively needed is really there, right? And we also know the policies we need to implement. And we even have plenty of technologies, right? But to make all of this work, we need really to work on lifestyles, on behavior, right? A change of hearts, as we heard. And we have to live in harmony with Mother Nature. And that's exactly where faith can make, I think, a very substantial contribution. So let me finish here by thanking all of you on behalf of FaithInvest and the Laudato Si Movement. Thank you all very much for your attention and participation. And for those attending the COP, please come over and visit the SELCO people, the FaithInvest people, Laudato Si Movement people. Many of them will be there. And I wish you all a lot of courage and ambition. And we all have faith in you to deliver. Thank you all very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Johannes.
Bye.
Bye-bye.